Genesis 1 verse 1 says like this: in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, there are many people who hold different opinions about verse 1. One of the common opinions about verse 1 is this opinion called, or a theory called, as the gap theory. Because if you read verse 1 and then when you read verse 2, it'll seem like there is a disconnect. Okay? If you read verse 1, it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Second, verse 2 says like this: now the earth was formless and empty. So the question people ask is, if God created, and then why is it now formless and empty? Why is there darkness over the surface of the deep? What's happening here? So some have come up with this understanding that God first created everything, and then sin happened, He destroyed, and He recreated again. So that is called as a gap theory. So they say that there is a lot of gap between verse 1 and verse 2. This is one of the common explanations you'll find. But if you read this chapter according to the way it's written, and I want to emphasize this, when you read the Bible, don't read it in the way you want to understand, but read it in the way the author has written it down. You're reading a book that was translated from Hebrew, not your mother tongue, not English, not your local language. So they are going to have a way of writing, a way of expressing certain points. And I'm going to talk about some of that now, because when you read it according to the way it's written, it'll make perfect sense to you. So oftentimes people look at a verse like this and say there's a gap between verse 1 and verse 2. And that gap is gap theory. God created, and during that time, for some reason, God destroyed. Some say it was because of sin that happened, or because Satan fell. God wanted to recreate everything, and so on. And finally, He made what we see today. But in reality, this is not the truth. This is far from the truth. What we must do is we must first understand the structure of chapter 1. If you look at verse 1 is an opening statement. Verse 1 is basically a summary of everything that happens, or everything that God did. So when Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 begins with this statement, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. It's an opening statement. And then the actual accounts of creation starts from verse 2 onwards. You can understand it this way. Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 talks about what happened. That is, God created everything. And verse 2 onwards talks about how did it happen. So Genesis 1 verse 1 is an opening statement. Verse 2 onwards is the actual detail of what happened day by day. Okay, so it says like this: in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now let me talk more about it in detail. Just to give you an idea, if you look at this phrase, the heavens and the earth, the phrase heavens and the earth, you know what that basically means? It means everything that you see was created by God. There's a way things are expressed in Hebrew. For example, like the word universe that we have. When you hear the word universe, what do you think? Everything. Everything that you see, that you can the planets and everything. But in Hebrew, they use something called as a merism. It's a figure of speech where they will use two opposite elements, heaven and earth, to explain one big concept. Okay? So they will basically use two opposing forces to explain everything that happened. So when it says heaven and earth, it basically means everything that you see was created by God. I want to take you through the Hebrew Bible, because without the Hebrew Bible, we won't be able to understand what it actually means. So Hebrew is read from right to left, not left to right, right to left. Okay, so on top you see all the Hebrew letters. Below that you see the English transliteration for that. Okay, so it says like this: Bereshit bara Elohim et Hasamayim vayet Hares. That's what it says. Now each of these words means something very, very important, and I'm going to share that with you. If you look at the first word in Hebrew, it is Bereshit. The word Bereshit in Hebrew, when it comes to English, is translated as in the beginning. It's translated as in the beginning. So the word Bereshit has a very specific meaning. Now when you read in English, it says in the beginning, right? You understand something. But when you go to Hebrew, it is more precise. The word Bereshit means absolute beginning. It means absolute beginning. It means this is the first step, this is the first phase of everything. That is what it means in Hebrew. Bereshit means an absolute beginning. It basically says this was the beginning of everything that we see in our universe. What this also establishes is the fact that before this, nothing existed other than God. So Bereshit refers to an absolute beginning, a starting point when everything came into existence. But before that existence, who existed? God. Okay, so if you look at this word further, and if you look at how it's constructed in the Hebrew language, the word Bereshit is written without an article. Okay, so if you look at English, there is a noun and a proper noun. A proper noun, when it's a proper noun, we don't use articles before that. Okay, if it's a noun, we use. When it's a proper noun, we do not use. Now, when you look at this word, it's written as a proper noun. Bereshit is written as a proper noun, which means it's written in a very specific way where nobody can look back at it and say, maybe it doesn't mean that. Nobody can use that word to speculate anything. It is very clear as to what happened. So when Bereshit means that in the beginning, absolute beginning, it means exactly that, and it will always mean that way for years to come. Okay, so when we're reading Genesis chapter 1 verse 1, when we see it in Hebrew, it gives us a clear meaning as to what it actually means. So there is no two different ideas, or maybe it could be that, or another possibility. Absolutely not. The way it is written suggests that this was the first beginning. There is nothing before this, and from this point on, everything that you see began. So it's written with a proper noun. The meaning is very specific, and there is no other room to translate otherwise. Now when you look at this word Bereshit, it helps us destroy certain myths or certain arguments. Now there are a group of people called as the long agers. Long agers. They say that the sun, moon and the stars were created even before any of the days of creation. So even before any of the days of creation, the sun, moon and the stars were created over a vast period of time. Now we don't know how long it is. It could be 1,000 of years, thousands of years, 10,000 years, or 1,000,000 or more. There are a group of Christians called long agers who believe that sun, moon and stars were created over a vast period of time. But when you look at this word Bereshit, it says absolutely not. It says that there was a beginning, and from this point everything was created. From this point onwards, the sun, the moon, the stars, the galaxies, the planets, everything that you see was created. Before this, there was no creation. Only God existed. So there are a group of people who have different ideas about the creation of sun, moon and stars. They believe it took a long period of time, but in reality, it didn't take that long. In reality, it didn't take that long. So what it says, the word Bereshit, and when you study in Hebrew, it gives us an understanding that it was the absolute beginning, the first beginning from that point onwards.